Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Daniel Kwok. I'm a real estate entrepreneur and also author of that book right there, 0 to 75 Units in 1 Year. In this video, we're going to talk about how to find the best real estate investing opportunities and the best real estate investing deals. Now, this video is part 2 of a 4-part video series that we're doing. I'm releasing for free here on our channel, The Kwok Brothers, on how to invest in real estate 101. Now, if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I highly encourage you to go back and watch part 1 because it's so integral to what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so when it comes to finding the best possible real estate investing opportunities, remember what I said in part 1 of the series, guys. It's not about buying a rental property or buying an asset. It's about starting a real estate investing business. And while I tried a lot of these different methods like direct mail and all these other things, but if you really think about it, all these things are under the umbrella of, hey, let's buy a piece of property, as opposed to, hey, let's actually set up a framework and a system that works for us, and let's actually design a strategy. That way we can find and also attract the best real estate deals possible. So I think of it like this. I think of finding deals like fishing. Now, a lot of the stuff that is out there right now in terms of finding deals, it's a lot like you standing out there in the river with the fishing pole. So there you go, boom, and you get the bait right there, and once you find the seller, oh, I got one, you reel it in. Now, imagine if you're sitting on that river, you've got your fishing chair, you've got your bait, your tackle, and everything that you need to be a good fisherman or woman. And let's say you've been fishing for 6 hours. You've been fishing all day, and now it's dinner time, and you've caught 7 fish. It's a pretty good day. I actually don't know if that's good or not. I don't fish much. But anyways, let's say that after those 7 hours, it's almost dinner time. You're about to take what you have caught and go back to the kitchen and clean and cook and eat. However, you see me walking up right next to you, and I'm like, hey, how's your day so far? Awesome. Did you have a good day? You caught 7 fish. That's great. Now imagine as I say this, I reach down into the river, I pull out this trap that I set earlier in that morning, and in that trap you see 7 fish, the exact same amount of fish that you caught. Now, how would you feel seeing the amount of fish that I've caught? You would probably feel pretty angry, right? Because like, hey man, I spent all day here trying to catch these 7 fish. I've spent, all day sitting here and reeling the fish in and having to be patient and putting the bait. Whereas you could have done anything you wanted all day and you've caught the same amount of fish. Now, the same thing applies to finding the best real estate investment deals. You can do all of it. I'm not telling you to just set the trap. I'm not telling you to just, sit on the chair and fish. I'm telling you to do all of it. Because guess what? If you set the trap and you have your fishing pole out and you're right there, you catch double the fish. You catch 14 and not 7. Now, before we go ahead and talk about the ways that you can do that and creating the frameworks, and I'm going to share with you guys by the end of this video, the best way that I have personally found real estate deals, or should I rephrase that? The best way I've had real estate opportunities come to me. And I've actually acquired somewhere between 50 to 60 rental units by using this method. I'm going to share that with you before the end of the video. But before we go ahead and talk about that, let's go ahead and answer this question, right? What is the best way to find good deals? Well, let's first define what is the best, because if we're going to ask ourselves that question, well, we have to define what best is. And it's very similar to when people ask me, Daniel, how do I find good deals? Well, I don't tell them, oh, you got to do direct mail, you got to do this. I simply tell them, well, what's good for you? Because a good deal for me may not be what a good deal is for you. So we have to define what is the best. And even, to this day, to some extent, some of the things that I defined as the best deals were as follows. And with the clap of my hands, boom, there it is. These are all the things that I wrote down in terms of what defined for me as the best. Because, well, just even going back to that fishing analogy, well, imagine if the 7 fish that I had caught were all fish that I didn't want to eat, that I didn't want to keep, and I had to just throw them back. I would have just wasted that entire time catching those 7 fish. So instead, I want to figure out, well, not only can I get quantity of deals coming in, right, in terms of numbers, I want to get quality deals coming in. For example, I'd much rather look at 10 deals, which all of them are great. Every single one of them fit this category of what I'm looking for, as opposed to getting 100 deals and maybe only like 5 or 10 are super duper good because, well, I'm gonna have to spend all that time going through 100 of those deals to find those 10. So speaking of which, what I was looking for at the time when I first started, I wanted Class BC solid neighborhood. Now, what Class BC means is it goes from Class A to Class D. Your Class A are your high-end luxury, apartments, rents are really high. It's a really good area with an awesome school district and very fancy amenities, you name it. Whereas Class D, probably not the best area. There's windows that are shattered in, there's graffiti everywhere, and you probably hear a couple gunshots at night. So as you can guess, Class BC is kind of in the middle, right? And again, I was looking for a solid neighborhood where, you may not necessarily see a bunch of Mercedes and BMWs being driven around or Teslas, but you're also not going to see cars that were robbed, right? Or those cars were supported by those cinder blocks, right? I wanted something that's going to cash flow within the first 30 days to minimize my risk. I also wanted to know how the property was going to perform before I even buy it. At the time, I witnessed a lot of people buy properties and it was their first deal. And they were kind of in for a surprise when they first bought it, right? I mean, like 3 months in, they realized that the amount of expenses actually exceeded than what they were projecting, right? They saw the offering memorandum or the P&L statement that the owner had put together, and they realized that the numbers were off, which, by the way, 90% of the time, if you're looking at a brochure or a P&L statement that the owner or broker put together, a lot of times the expenses are exaggerated to be a little lower than what they actually are. So again, just a heads up. I would actually recommend you asking for what's known as a Form 8825 or Schedule E, which is the actual tax form that you are required to file to the IRS for income and expenses of a real estate property. That way you get the real and true numbers. That's how I did it and how I still do it. And not only that, but I also wanted a property where I had the opportunity to raise rents and therefore increase the value as well, because that way I can enjoy a little bit more of the upside. So this was some of the things that I wrote down on my list in terms of the best way possible. Now, this is where things get a lot of fun, because once we figured out what is the best deal, I can figure out what is the best way, because, well, you can't figure out how to do something unless you know what you're doing, right? It's a lot like, hey, I want a car that's going to be the most fuel efficient. You're not going to get a Ferrari. Now, if you were to walk down the street and you were to mention Ferrari, people are going to say, oh my gosh, that's a great car. It's the best one. But in the case of fuel efficiency, it's not the best one. That's why identifying what is the thing, what defines a good deal or the best deal for you is going to help us identify the best way to find it in the first place. So I started asking myself, well, what is the best way to find these types of properties? And this is the same thing that I would have you guys do as well. If you guys want to go ahead and pause the video or do it after this video, please get out a sheet of paper and write down, hey, what are my ideals, right? As in, what for me defines a good deal? What defines the best deal for me? Now, in terms of the best way to find a deal, I like creating a system, right? I want to create a framework so that I could successfully run my real estate business as opposed to just acquiring deals. So going back to the fishing analogy, I want to be able to find ways where I could be active. I can look for properties actively, AKA sit on the river with my chair and have my fishing pole, right? I am there. I am actively fishing. I also want ways where I could do it passively, as in have deals be sent to me. This is the equivalent of setting the trap, right? I set the trap and I get to leave and I come back and I see how much fish I caught, right? And I also want where I could do both. So I want a hybrid of both my active and my passive way of doing something, because I want to be able to enjoy the best of both worlds, right? There are going to be tricks and techniques that I'm about to show you guys right now that involve active and passive. So in terms of identifying what I just identified, right? Class B, C, these are all the things that I'm looking for. I need to then find the best ways to find that best property. So let's go ahead and first start with active. Now, the way I really got to know a property, and we're going to talk about this a lot in part 4 when we start talking about analyzing not just the property, but also analyzing the markets. But I took some time to analyze which neighborhoods and which areas of the market that I wanted to invest in. And again, I'll share that with you guys in part 4. But by doing so, I got to know some areas pretty well. And because I knew some areas pretty well, I started calling for rent signs. So if you guys remember in part 1, I talked about the importance of KPIs, key performance indicators, the things that you do every single day, week, and every single month. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, was one of my KPIs. As a matter of fact, every week I would spend 3 to 4 hours driving around in the neighborhoods that I knew were the Class B, C solid neighborhoods, and I would call for rent signs. And the night before, I would plan my route. I would figure out what my scripts were, and afterwards I would have a debrief session where I would go to a Panera or a Starbucks and I would organize all the numbers I collected for that day. So you might be asking, well, Daniel, what exactly are you doing when you're calling for rent signs? Now remember, this is an active part of finding deals because I'm out there weekly, sometimes daily, but I'm out there actively calling signs. And what I would do is I would go to the neighborhoods that I really liked. I would look for rent signs, the signs that were, out in the front lawn, says for rent, call this number. Now, the reason why I wanted to call those numbers, because, well, number one, it's a very unorthodox way of finding the property. Because I knew a lot of these landlords were getting 30, 40 mailers in the mail, people wanting to buy their properties. If I do this, I could stand out. So what I would do is for 3-4 hours, I would go to these neighborhoods, I'd see the sign, and I, dial the number and I say, ring, 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 right? And what I would say is, hi, my name is Daniel. I'm a local real estate entrepreneur. I saw your for rent sign and I wanted to see if you had any interest in selling. Now, notice how I didn't say the actual address of what sign I was calling for. Now, why would I do that? Well, it's because if I don't say the address and they ask which one, that tells me that they own a portfolio. They actually own other buildings that I could potentially acquire if this one doesn't work out. Whereas if I called them and I say, hey, I saw your for rent sign on 321 South Main Street, well, I'm limiting myself to that just one transaction, to that one asset, as opposed to expanding my horizons, right? So I would simply make that call. They would either say no, they would either say yes. Now, if they said no, they're not interested, I would ask them a second question. I would say, all right, well, would you be interested in buying more properties? And what I would do is I would create a buyer's list. I would create my buyer's list that I could potentially, one day if I wanted to sell my property or sell the ones that I already have or sign a contract, I knew who to call. The key, guys, is to squeeze every single juice you possibly can out of every single action. It's all about being efficient and going in the right direction, like we talked about in part 1 of this video series. So that's what I would do. That was my active way of finding the best deals the best way. So again, 3-4 hours a week did really, really well for me. Okay, now let's talk about hybrid. And I'm gonna skip past for now because my number one way of how I found properties and the way I acquired 50 to 60 doors just by using this channel was actually through passive. So I'm gonna save the best one for the last. But for hybrid, just to make it really quick, a lot of it was being the real estate guy. Now, let me share with you what that means. It means a lot of times just putting yourself out there and networking, putting things out on Facebook. I remember anytime I had a property under contract, I would go to the property and I would take a selfie and I would upload it to my different social media, platforms that I had. And sooner or later, people would, message me and say, hey, I have an uncle that's thinking about selling, or hey, I have a friend who's, hey, I saw your post and you're buying real estate. And the reason why it's hybrid is because the passive aspect comes from the fact that people are actually reaching out to you because you're establishing yourself as the real estate guy, but you're also actively doing it. Any successful real estate investor or entrepreneur will tell you that networking and building relationships is something that you're doing constantly. It's something that you're doing every day, every hour, every week, every month. And quite frankly, you should be doing it. You should be networking at all times. So there's an active and a passive aspect to it as well. Being the real estate guy, that's what I'd highly, highly recommend. Now, let's talk about the passive. My favorite way of acquiring properties because it works so well. And it actually is in super alignment with everything that is here. So I started asking myself, okay, how do I create a scenario where I have deals be sent to me as opposed to me having to go find them. If I'm really looking to create a system, if I'm really looking to create a strategy where I get the best deals and with the least amount of work, because I don't know about you guys, but I like to achieve the maximum amount of results with the least amount of work, headache, time, and money. I started asking myself, how can I get this? How can I find a property that I know is going to cash flow within the first 30 days? How do I find a property that I know will perform before I even acquire it? And ultimately, how can I find properties in which I have the opportunity to raise rents? So here's what I did. I started building relationships with property managers. Now, here's how I did it. In the beginning of my career, I did a lot of networking. And when I started meeting with these property managers, I got in this habit of asking everybody I met, hey, what are some of the biggest obstacles that you currently have in your business right now? And time again, it seemed that, every single property manager I was talking to, they were saying, you know what would be awesome if there was a way where I could never lose business, in terms of I could never lose the amount of units I have under management. I just had a client who sold their building, and now the amount of units I manage in my property management office went from 300 to 250, and if I lose another 50 units, then I'm, losing money every single month, right? I'm at my threshold, that the line I need to uphold for my business to stay afloat. So one day I came up with this crazy idea of, hey, what if, for the property manager, the next time they have a client that wants to sell their building, they had them call me first instead. Because, first and foremost, when I'm looking at all these things that define the best deal for me, who's gonna know better than a property manager on whether or not there's going to be an opportunity to raise rents and increase the value? I mean, that's what they do full time, and they know these neighborhoods and these assets better sometimes than even the owner. And who better than the property manager to know on whether the property will perform before the acquisition? Because since I got the property manager involved, guess what? I don't have to go to the owner for the profit and loss statement. I don't have to go to the broker for the brochure. I can just talk to the guy managing the property, and he's going to tell me exactly how that property performed the last 12 months, the last 24, the last 3 years, the last 5 years. And I'll know exactly whether or not is it going to cash flow the first 30 days, how it's going to perform, and what type of neighborhood it's in. And so this method right here created a win-win scenario because, well, number one, he had a way where he never loses his unit count. And I had a way where I could get properties be sent to me without having to go out every single week, every month, and I can get the cream of the crop deals. I can get deals that this property manager knows to a T, inside and backwards. And not only that, but I had him on my side because I told him, look, if things work out, if you're a great property manager, I'll buy it from that client and you stay as the manager. That way you don't have to learn an entirely new building. You don't have to learn, you don't have to meet new tenants. You could just continue to work with the ones you already have a relationship with. And worst case scenario, if I don't hire you, well, guess what? You get the broker's commission, because if you're a property manager, that means you have a managing broker's license. So you'll make 2.5% on my purchase anyways. So it was a complete win-win. And again, this is the way that I had, that I acquired 50, 60 units with minimal amount of work, because I developed relationships with property managers who gave me a call, who were able to give me the numbers right then and there. And that gave me a competitive advantage over everybody else. So as I wrap up, I want you guys to think about what are active, passive, and hybrid ways. What are 3 different ways that you guys are finding the most and the best, the most efficient deals that you guys can possibly be doing right now? And don't forget, guys, it all starts with creating the list of what is the best deal for me, and then moving on to then what is the best way to acquire that particular type of properties. And again, creating a passive way, a hybrid way, and an active way, creating an entire framework and a strategy to be able to have deals be sent to your door. So again, guys, I hope this video was super helpful. If you feel like it was, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like it, like this video, and I'll see you guys on part 3 of this real estate investing series.